I'm glad you're trimming the start because I didn't wait until it was being recorded. Okay, thank you for joining us, folks. I hope you enjoyed the screening of Pope Joan. I certainly did. This was a show from before my time at Women's Circus, so it was really great to see what was happening before I got here. Before we go any further, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Sal. I'm one of the trainers at Women's Circus. Been hanging around for a long time, but not long enough to have seen this show. And I would also like to acknowledge that I am coming to you from the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I would like to pay my respects to all Aboriginal elders, past, present, and emerging, from where I am, from where you are, right across so-called Australia, and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded, always was, always will be Aboriginal land. So today, I am joined by the one and only Kim Baston, who is the musical director of Women's Circus from, what year was Pope Joan? Let's say that was 97 through to 2001, I believe, which was Secrets, was Kim's final show. It was my first show. But yeah, I've worked a bit with Kim with performing older women's circus since that time. But yeah, it's an absolute joy to have you with us here today, Kim.
Thank you for having me, Sal.
Delightful to see you. Kim, I have to say, like I keep banging on about the fact that this show was before my time with Women's Circus. It's a long time ago. It's 23 years ago now. So I've been hanging around for about 19 years, I think. And it's not like I had forgotten, but I think I had forgotten just what an extraordinary job you and Sarah Cathcart did together in terms of steering the shows creatively.
Well, thanks.
You're welcome, mate. Thank you.
Yep.
I feel like basically, I think I'm used to going to a lot of shows now where there's a lot, like, you know, there's an act to a track and there's an act to another track, whether it's live or it's played back. But this was, I mean, you just created an entire world of sound for these shows, and it's extraordinary.
I think because I didn't come from circus, so I treated it as being another branch of theatre, and the music had to be an entire narrative world that would as it would if I was writing music for theatre. So I think that was purely because of that fact, but also because those shows were very much a consistent, coherent narrative piece. So it felt that the music wasn't having to do things like mark tricks or do any of those circus things. It needed to create the world of the show.
It seems, I watched this show, and I know that you and Sarah Cathcart, who's artistic director, worked together for 5 years. And I kind of did the maths in my head and worked out that it was your first show, and I couldn't believe it. Like I think it's extraordinary what's been elicited from the performers in the show, and the way that it's all worked together with the music was just absolutely extraordinary. Did you find it easy to come into Women's Circus, or like did it? I wonder, was there a lot? Yeah, I was going to say, like in terms of steering it towards more of that making a theatre soundtrack, how was that experience for you?
Well, it was also because it's also Sarah Cathcart's first show, so it was, I think, for both of us, the coming into the massiveness of the Women's Circus at that point was a challenge for both of us. You know, having not experienced that. Just the sheer scale and size of the performances at that point, because it wasn't just about having that number of performers on stage, and there were always a huge number of people involved in them. It was about the, you know, taking over of a space that wasn't a circus theatre space and transforming it into a theatre, which was extraordinary. And that was the old garage, I mean, an undercover parking area next to the old Melbourne Jail, which was just a car park when it started. So it was
such a mammoth undertaking.
And that was what was one of the fantastic things about the project, I think, just thinking, my goodness, this is almost impossible to do over a relatively short period of time, and yet somehow it happened. Mostly because, you know, all the women were so involved in making that happen and making that space happen. But yeah, so it wasn't an easy process that particular year, I have to say. In many ways, at many points I went, no, that I cannot do this. But
so if you
know,
I was just going to say, if you hadn't done Circus before, how were we lucky enough to end up with you?
oh, I think because I hadn't been in Melbourne for very long. I mean, it's one of the first things I did when I moved to Melbourne. And I think, as I remember it, I knew Amanda Owen, who used to be the head trainer. You'll know Amanda very well. And yep. She introduced me to Donna Jackson at that point. And I said, oh, I think I said to Donna, I said, I think I sent my CV to you. How come you never replied? Over dinner, as one does. And she said, oh, well, I'm just leaving the circus, but send your tape in to Sarah Cathcart. She's the new artistic director. And if she doesn't get back to you, then you phone her up in 2 weeks. And I went, oh, okay. That's what I did. And I met Sarah a day when I remember I'd just been to the dentist. So I was Novocained out of my skull at that point and barely coherent and possibly dribbling. But, she gave me a 10-week contract and then we just went from there at that point.
10 weeks, is it? 10 weeks, did all of that come together in 10 weeks or did it get extended?
It was the beginning of the year. So that what happened was she just employed me as a trainer of the music group for 10 weeks. At the end of that time, we were asked to do a show for the State Library, which was it's beautiful, where there was a circus performance and whatever I'd worked out in 10 weeks with the music group was done in the State Library. And I think that, because that was the first time that Reggie's singing in the circus, which again was kind of an accident, and that worked so well that then a lot of other people joined the music group, and that's what ended up being in the show, pretty much.
Yeah, I remember, when the first show that I came and saw was The Island, and I went to the show with someone who knew some folks from Women's Circus, and we were talking to the music group afterwards and some of the singers. So I remember that being a really strong part of the show, and just thinking about how well that having like a choral group, how well that tied in with the theme with Pope Joan, with all the religious undertones and overtones.
Well, it was kind of easy with Pope Joan because you got church, you got singers, so it was a kind of an easy link, that one. But it mostly was because of the sort of open access policy basically to the music group, as for other, inclusive practices of the women's circus. It was whoever wanted to come and be in the music group could come and be in the music group. But that did mean that there were a lot of people who didn't play musical instruments or necessarily had much experience, certainly at Pope Joan. So that was one way of enabling a large group of people to perform music together.
Yeah, I wonder what you would have done with me if I'd rocked up without any musical instrument experience and just no capacity for holding a note.
Well, you wouldn't have been the first, Sal, should we to have turned up. What happens was I'd have probably ignored you and allowed the lovely women of my music group who took care of new people coming in to explain what was going on, and then we'd have gone from there. And if you'd sung really badly, I'd have turned your mic off in the performance. But you'd have been fine. I mean, one of the nice things, and I think about having I did have a very, not so much for this show because it was a very new show, but after that there were a number of people who worked with me for the next 4 shows essentially. So the group then functioned really well in terms of bringing new people in, because it meant that there were people who had experience who could nurture the people who had come in with less experience. And the good thing about having a choir is that you can just juggle what people can do within that.
When you're saying there are people there who sort of stayed through the whole way, I mean, the footage is a little bit grainy. We don't see a whole lot of the music group, but I did spy Claire Warren, who not only went through the whole way, but also when you came back and you were musical director again for the show Daddy in 2005. Claire was still kicking around then as well.
Well, Claire, I poached from the performing older women's circus at that point, because we were about to lose a percussionist from the group, and we really needed someone who could be very solid on percussion. And I heard Claire perform. I'd never met her before in a performing older women's circus show, and thought, right, I need her. So I said, come into the group, play the drums. And that's how Claire, again, it's kind of an accident, a series of accidents, how people sort of end up. And it's been great watching her kind of grow as a performer in that one, including to her amazing impersonation of Keith Richards.
Which I believe I've heard about.
Yeah. She is Keith Richards, I think, at that point.
Yeah, I've got to agree with that. Shout out to Claire if you're watching. Just also, we've both now kind of briefly mentioned the Performing Older Women's Circus, or POW, as most people know of it. Again, from someone who didn't come from a circus background, you then became artistic director of POW at some point. I remember dressing the stilt walkers and doing a little bit of tech work during some of POW's bigger shows.
Yeah, because that's a long time ago. So that was, how did that happen? Oh, I'm not entirely sure. It's such a long time ago. Yes, and I moved across because I worked in theatre. I've always worked as a musician, but also I've worked in theatre. I've worked as an actor. I've worked as a director. So for me, it wasn't it's not like a huge leap. It'd be interesting now that I know a lot more about circus than I did then, how that would play out. But really, at that point, and particularly for POW, the kind of circus skills were not the most important part of those shows. It was about telling a story. It was about doing something with those skills. So
I think something that I really loved about watching, I mean, I love storytelling in circus. I've seen lots and lots of circus tricks, and I've seen lots of people be amazing at them, but when they tell a story with it, for me, it doesn't matter what level the skill's at. If I'm engaged in the story, and not only engaged in the story, just again, going back to Pope Joan specifically, I feel like the circus skills are just interwoven beautifully into the narrative to tell all the different parts of the kind of parallel narratives that are happening at once.
I mean, and I think that was really the nature of all of the shows that Sarah directed. That's because narrative storytelling is her background, and they were such good stories. That's the point. They were I think both inspiring and surprising, and it's kind of interesting in the way those were being told, I think.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, is there any particular memories of, we'll bring it back to Pope Joan again specifically, just because, I mean, that's the one that we've just watched, and I guess that people can maybe kind of relate to what they've seen, but is there a particular memory from the production process or any, I know we're going back a long way, Kim, I know I'm asking a lot here, but is there anything that kind of stood out for you as an experience in your first year with Women's Circus?
It was a difficult show, that one. It got easier after that one. So in a sense, what was interesting for me was seeing where you could take people at the end of this one. So when I came back, after doing Pope Joan, because I wasn't sure whether I was coming back after that show, I was exhausted, was about how far you could train a group of people, musically, essentially. It's how far you could kind of take them, because I listen to the music there and I think, oh yeah, that's where we cobbled together a piece that we threw in at the last minute because we had that. Because one of the difficulties within the music group was that the women had to not only learn the music themselves, but they had to accompany the entire show, which is a big ask. It's a lot of music to do. And also because music accompanies the circus performance rather than the other way around, they were continually having to adapt what they did. So something might be this long in rehearsal, and then by the time we got to opening night, it might be longer or it might be shorter, or things would change in performance that had to be responded to. And that was actually quite hard to do. So that was something I learned from that show, was how to build those moments into the actual composition and the structuring of the music. I just want to say what an extraordinary job you did of that, because actually watching the show, and I watched it a couple of times in the last couple of weeks because I hadn't seen it before, and I enjoyed it a lot and wanted to get a bit more out of it, and
you folks at home can do the same. It's up on YouTube now. But yeah, like in terms of fitting in the music with the live performance, it almost, like, there are times where it's like, it could be that the performers are responding to the music, or the music's responding to the performers. You can't really tell. And that's like, to have it so seamless like that, and to not know where things are being instigated from, is just, it's an unreal feat, mate.
Well, a lot of it was working with the lighting. Weirdly enough, I spend a lot of my time working with the lighting. So I'd say, who cues what? Who's starting the scene? Is it you or is it me? And, you know, so, which kind of seems like a weird way around in terms of working out how things fit with each other. But that was often how it went. It went with lighting cues more than, you know, if I start this piece, you're going to move to the next state, and that how it begins, or the other way around.
Do you remember who did the lighting design for Pope Joan?
Jenny. I think it was the marvelous Jenny as production manager. Oh no, it was F2P Soropos who designed the lighting, did a beautiful job on that. But in terms of the operation of it, that I can't remember.
Yeah.
I know there was Jenny, whose second name I've forgotten, who was the production manager, who was fantastic. I mean, the production manager was always great. I spent a lot of my time hanging out with the techies, who were a great bunch of people to hang out with.
Oh, we were back in those days. I actually recall when we were in Shed 14 for Secrets, we had one of the many things that the community had to take responsibility for, and it was everything, because as you said before, we were like transforming spaces that were not theatre spaces. Shed 14, massive shed. We had a little look at it when we looked at Ghosts a couple of months ago on this Sunday series. But one of the things we had to do was security. So we had to have someone there at all times, and it was just a solo shift during the day. But if it was overnight, there had to be at least 3 people there. And you and I and a couple of other techies had a bit of a sleepover together in Shed 14.
Yes.
And I was working on sound with Dawn, who was production manager and sound designer. And of course we had access to a great sound system for a party that evening.
We did.
Yeah.
Indeed. Very nice. I used to like doing those things. I think that was part of the community. It was kind of it wasn't just doing a show. It felt like an enormous undertaking in which you became part of some enormous thing. And it was always, for me, it was always like the last show I did in a year. So I could then collapse into a small heap, which is what I normally did in the after show party, and then continue being in a small heap until the next year started. So there was a tremendous, that was, I think, I don't think I've ever been involved in shows that involved you quite as much as it did feel that you lived it for quite a period of time. But yeah, that was fantastic aspect of it.
And what are you doing now, Kim?
Oh, I'm a lecturer now. I'm an academic. I'm a serious adult, teaching at La Trobe University. So yeah.
Still teaching over Zoom.
I know a lot more about, and I'm researching circus history. I know so much more about circus. If you want to know about equestrian performances and circus in the 18th century, I am hilariously the expert.
That's amazing. And for folks out there who don't know that, the word for circus comes from obviously circle, and the performing in the round comes from, actually it was originally, I think, something to do with the equestrian acrobatic stuff, acrobatics on horses.
Yeah, yes, I think more circuses need horses in them. Yes, so the circle comes from riding horses around it. Yeah, I know all about it.
I'm a bit of a fan of a panto horse these days.
Yes, indeed. We need more horses. Yeah. So, you were asking me about big moments from that show. There are all sorts of little moments that really stick in my mind as things of. There was a lovely moment when dear old Jules de Chinquet did some little disco dancing on stage, and I used to hang out for that moment because it made me laugh every time I saw it. I loved that. There was a very beautiful moment in rehearsal.
Jules played Joan of Arc, yeah?
Yeah.
Did I spot Jules playing Joan of Arc?
gorgeous moment when she suddenly revealed she was a nun and then she became Joan of Arc. It was just always such a gorgeous moment on stage. So there were those kind of little moments of things that I look forward to. There was an amazing moment in rehearsal when I'd worked out that one of the women in the circus at that point, Jane Molson, had a fantastic voice, but she was really shy and she wouldn't sing in front of me. So I could never, kind of front her up with the fact that maybe she could do a solo once I'd worked out who it was who had this voice. And I had to do it by taking people away. So maybe 4 of you could sing it. Oh, how about only 3 of you sing it? And then how about you have a go of doing this on your own? And she sang this beautiful Hildegard from Bingen, 13th century, 11th century something chant. And the whole circus stopped because the sound of her voice in this garage just echoed through the building. And literally everybody just stopped and went, "Whoa!" It was so amazing. So that was a really kind of amazing moment, I think.
I remember Jane's voice. I think I only did the one show with Jane, but
yeah. And that was kind of, for me, that was really great to have someone who, has come in, who really likes it, has got a voice, but doesn't really appreciate the nature of it. And the good thing about working for such a long time with the circus and with women was getting them to, to be able to push them to actually be confident in what they were doing. Singing is a nice thing to do for confidence, I think. So that was always good, And the music got a lot harder. And when I listened to the music for Pope Joan, I think, God, that was really simple, because people weren't experienced in things like singing harmony or so it's really simple components. But certainly by the time we got to the next show, it got much harder. And by the time we did Lilith, which is probably my favourite show out of the 5, the music was really complex. And that always made me feel very, happy that you could actually, but it was only a matter of time, spending that time with people to get more skills in what you do.
Well, if anyone out there has a copy of Lilith that's in good nick somehow that they can get to us to maybe digitize,
I think the video.
I would love to see that. And so we, give us a reason to do a couple more of these. That'd be great. Yeah. I think we're going to have to wrap it up fairly soon. Unfortunately, I feel like with the 2 of us in a Zoom room together, we could talk for a very long time. So I'm going to rein it in while I can. But Kim, it's so lovely to see you. I hope that you are keeping well during weird world times. I'm not even going to talk about that, but yeah, you look great, and it's so great to see you.
And thanks for inviting me. It was really nice to see Pope Joan. I haven't seen it for 23 years, and there was something very magical, I think, about seeing that. There were good times, quite extraordinary.
Yeah, it was an incredible experience for me, having come in just after that, but having missed that, to sort of go back and be reminded of where things were at when I first came along. So yeah, it was awesome. I hope everyone enjoyed that as much as I did. Kim, take care of yourself, pal. Hopefully I'll see you soon. I mean, we haven't worked on projects together for a long time. Where we do usually see each other is out at theatre events. Haven't been to any of those in a while, but hopefully not before too long.
Not before too long, hopefully.
All right. Take care, mate.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. This is the last one of these Sunday Circus cinemas. But who knows what's in store down the track. I mean, in any aspect of our lives right now, who knows what's in store? I've got no bloody idea. But thanks for joining us today, and maybe we'll do it again. All right, cheers, folks.